Thank you to Aura for sponsoring a portion of today's video. So I somehow have been getting estranged parent TikTok recommended on my algorithm, and I figured I'd react to some of them. Now, to preface this, I want to say not all of these are bad. In particular, I want to go into this not with the mindset of shaming these people. Obviously, if they say something that's out of line, then I'm going to explain why I think it's out of line. But I also want to kind of just understand where they're coming from better, because this is clearly a community that's growing. And listen, there are 7 billion people out there right now. There are bound to be estranged parents out there who maybe are not bad people. So just going into this with an open mind, I think you'll see some of these TikToks are a little out of line. Some of them are super respectful. And then some of them I just kind of have some intellectual qualms with. Let's get started. All right, let's start with the first one.
All right, I need to respond to this. Millie's comment: if your adult child has walked away from you and cut communication, the real question is, what was said or done to make them not even want to reconcile with you? I'm taking your comment as you're assuming the parent did something. Why is that your first assumption?
Okay, so to kind of answer this question, I think the reason why many of us tend to assume that the parent did something is because the bond that a child feels with their parents is extremely powerful. It's one that, regardless what a parent does, is so strong that it takes a whole lot for a child to sever it. In most cases. I mean, think about even during pregnancy. You are literally connected to this child inside of you. You are carrying this child for 9 months. Your nervous systems are literally linked with each other. This child cannot survive without you. Think about the deep-seated primal link that a mother has with her child. And then think about in infancy. When you're a parent, you're spending hours upon hours with this child. You are feeding them every 2 to 3 months. You're experiencing these massive boosts of oxytocin. You're single-handedly protecting and nourishing this child. And then when they're not infants anymore, but maybe later on in childhood, you're this child's role model. They idealize you. You can do no wrong in their eyes. You've spent so much time with this child that they probably see you as their best friend in some ways. And then even in adulthood, you have so much shared history with this child. This child has more shared history with you than with anybody else in their life. The amount of bonding time that has accumulated is so many hours, so many days, so many weeks, months. The amount of opportunities you had to support this child, the amount of opportunities to pass love between the two of you. So what kind of events need to happen for an adult child to decide to rupture a relationship like that? Usually it has to be something pretty drastic. Usually people only have to reach such a threshold of pain that it's less painful for them to sever their relationship with this person who is crucial to them than it is to live without them. And make no mistake, estranged children do suffer. They suffer a lot. It might seem like they, just took a step forward and never looked back to their parents, but they're also reporting huge amounts of guilt and self-doubt and missing that person. This is not an easy choice. And so when a person makes a really drastic, difficult choice like that, it's because the pain of not doing that has become so insurmountable. And that just puts in context how much pain it needs to be for them to be in relationship with their parent. And hey, even if it is true that your child for some reason finds it completely painless to sever their relationship with you, that's also an opportunity to ask yourself why that might be. Were those opportunities for bonding, for love, for support fulfilled throughout those years? Because that's not normal. Let's keep watching.
What about these entitled kids who think it's cool and want to say, oh my God, I have all this trauma, when there's no trauma? The therapists are filling their heads full of complete bullshit. Why is it?
Okay. All right. When people get comments like, I can tell exactly why your child estranged themselves from you. It's because we're seeing some of those harmful behaviors in real time. So right now, here we go. These entitled kids. Speaking about your children with such contempt is typically a good indicator of why those kids needed to distance themselves in the first place. Even if you were to have an entitled child, most parents still adore their children, despite their flaws. Number 2, no one is estranging themselves from their parents because they think it's cool to have trauma. Okay, there might be some people out there who genuinely do think it's cool to have trauma and who try to malinger their symptoms for attention, but it usually doesn't reach a point where they would sever the relationship with their most important attachment figure. Number 3, this idea of therapists are filling their heads. No, that's not happening. When I hear this, all I hear is, I cannot accept that my children can think for themselves. I cannot accept that an expert in trauma has deemed that they have experienced trauma. And I cannot take responsibility for the harm that I've caused. And by the way, therapists do not do this, okay? I have never heard of a therapist encouraging a client to distance themselves from their parents. The most a therapist will do is help a person get in touch with their feelings, and that might include feelings of hurt caused by their parent, help them set healthier boundaries, and help them realize how that person wants to move forward. And listen, sometimes people will go to therapy and then they'll come back and they'll say to people in their lives, well, my therapist said this or my therapist said that. It's not usually true. It's usually just a way to not take responsibility for the decision they themselves have made or to kind of distort what their therapist actually said, because therapists ethically are obliged to not tell their clients how to live their lives. There might be very rare situations where therapists behave unethically, but that is not the norm, not by a long shot.
It's always the parents' fault. When is the kid's going to step up and when is that child going to step up and take responsibility for their actions and their
Take responsibility for what? That's not how responsibility works. When somebody comes to you and says, hey, you traumatized me or you caused me harm when you did this and that, shifting the focus back onto what they have done to cause that is victim blaming. How responsibility works is you are responsible for your behavior, they are responsible for their behavior. Them confronting you about your behavior is not something that they need to take responsibility for. And by the way, you as the parent have the power in the relationship. And therefore, you are the more responsible one no matter what, even when that child is an adult. You do have more responsibility, more of a role in taking accountability for what has happened in that relationship because there was that power imbalance.
Their comments and their lack of respect. It's not always the parent's fault, sweetheart.
So here again, this word respect is coming up that we hear a lot among estranged parents. And I've talked about how respect for young people typically means something pretty different than what it means for older generations. For my generation, respect means I treat you with all the human rights that you deserve. Respect for older generations is typically in the context of you know your place in the hierarchy. You let me keep the power and you don't disrupt things. But if that's the definition we're operating on, that respect is deep-seated admiration or acceptance that this person is above you in some way, that type of respect has to be earned, particularly once lost. You can't demand respect from another person. You can act in ways that make that person respect you more, but you can't demand respect. And respect in the way that I'm talking about, respect of each other's humans' rights, that one is bi-directional. That one goes both ways, and both people need to show respect. That was a doozy. We have some more interesting TikToks to react to. But before we get into that, I want to tell you about the sponsor of today's video, Aura. So I'm not going to lie, this TikTok makes me feel angry. And the first step I usually take when I'm feeling a painful emotion is to practice mindfulness of it. And this is where Aura comes in really handy. Aura is an all-in-one mindfulness and meditation app designed to help you navigate the challenges of everyday life and just generally nurture your well-being. It has a content library filled with a wide range of guided meditations, soothing sleep sounds, hypnotherapy, all created to reduce your stress, improve your sleep quality, and cultivate mindfulness, which again is crucial for things like emotion regulation. Whether you're new to meditation or an experienced meditation user, Aura offers a completely customized experience to support you on your mental health journey. For example, right in the beginning when you log in, there's a Q&A that helps you personalize it to what you prefer in a meditation app. It's used by over 7 million people, and it even won the Best of Apple award. It's kind of like Spotify for the mind and soul. So to help with today's topic of emotion regulation, I actually created my own emotion regulation playlist on Aura, designed to help you gain greater mindfulness and awareness of your feelings so that you can process through them rather than work around them. So if you're looking for a way to be more mindful of your emotions, or if you want to practice self-care, or if you want to improve your sleep, give Aura a try. Get started today completely for free using my link below, and the first 500 people to use my link will also get 25% off and a free trial to the Aura membership. Thank you so much to Aura. Let's get back to those TikToks. So I'd like to alternate with a TikTok that is a little bit more encouraging and enlightening. This is a user called 50s Rediscovery. This is actually somebody who I follow on TikTok. I would recommend you guys give her a follow as well. She is an estranged parent, so let's see what she has to say.
You, when they no longer need food and shelter, is a direct reflection.
Go back and watch the video. It's very interesting. But yes, how I treat my mother now is a direct reflection of how she treated me when I needed her when I was a kid. Having said that, how my children treat me now is a direct reflection of how I treated them when they were younger and needed me. This is very hard for parents to come to terms with. They don't. I think a lot of parents go, that's not true. This is where the disconnect comes. I loved my kids. I gave them everything. You gave them everything that you thought they needed. But did you give them everything that they needed from their perspective? And I know that I didn't do that all the time with my kids. I tried to, at times I really did try to, but I hadn't healed my trauma. And so anytime I was triggered, I wasn't able to be there for my kids. I wasn't able to be present for them. When things were going smoothly, I was good. I was there. I was present. But as soon as something triggered me, poof, I was in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. I was in survival mode, and I could not be present for my kids. Couldn't. And so as my kids grew up and they started to distance themselves from me, I kind of went, what's going on here? What's happening here? And I looked at myself. And now that I'm looking back on my children's childhood, I'm recognizing some stuff that I really missed the mark on. And it's not up to my children to tell me where I missed the mark. A lot of parents will be like, well, my kids won't tell me what I did wrong. That's not their job. I was supposed to know what to do as a parent. I was supposed to know that stuff. That's why we shouldn't be having kids until we know this stuff and we've healed our trauma. God, I wish I would have knew that.
What I really appreciate about this TikTok is it shows how when you're a parent, your own traumas affect how you then go on to parent your children. And this user has been open about the fact that for a while there, she was estranged from her own mother. I believe they ended up rekindling. She's been open about her own journey of estrangement with a couple of her children. I believe she rekindled with one of them, not with another one. And it's very true that in order to heal the future, the relationship with your successors, you need to first take a look at your relationship with your descendants, because trauma is passed on intergenerationally. What we don't look at about our own experiences gets transmitted on to the next generation and the next and the next. And so a huge part of fixing your relationship with your own children might be also getting really honest about what happened in your own childhood that hurt. Not as a diversion tactic. Let me make this very clear. When you're discussing your relationship with your children and the harm that you caused, then it is really important to focus on your behavior and to take responsibility for your behavior. Separately, you can process what happened to you that was not your responsibility. What are those wounds that, of course, impact how you treat your children, but should be addressed somewhat separately. So again, I thought that TikTok was really true and also shows that, listen, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. If you are an estranged parent, that doesn't mean that you are necessarily persona non grata forever. You know, like you can do the work to heal your own wounds, to take responsibility for what happened with you and your children, And in some cases, those relationships are salvageable if you do that work. So this user is responding to a comment that says, I always want to see what the kids have to say because I've been no contact for 5 years and it's been great. Kids naturally want to cling to their mother, so it must have been bad for her to go no contact. Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying at the beginning of this video. Let's see what this content creator has to say in response.
Well, I think it's probably the same reason you went no contact 5 years ago. It's the parents' fault. I'm sure your parents were narcissistic. I'm sure they were mean. I'm sure they lacked the emotional maturity to self-reflect and to admit the things that they did wrong. And that they don't have the ability to change. That it's the same for almost every single person who has gone no contact. I've read the...
So I'm getting the sense that this is sarcastic, that she's saying like, oh, well, because that was the case for you, it must be the case for everybody. I gotta tell you, I'm not really sure what to say to this other than like, in a majority of cases, that is what happens. And listen, you might be an exception to that rule, and there are always exceptions to the rule. But clearly, estranged children have tried communicating this over and over again. They're like, hey, no one estranges themselves because it's easy. People go no contact because things have really reached a painful threshold. I'm not really seeing a counter argument to that, except, oh, well, it's not the case for me, maybe. Okay, fair. Maybe that's the case, but that doesn't change the fact that for the majority of children who estrange themselves from their parents, that is the reason.
Comments. I mean, they come after me nonstop. They tell me from a video that I make that lasts 1 minute and 6 seconds that they know exactly why my child went no contact. I don't know, but they know. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. And you're saying that it has to be really, really bad to go no contact. Okay. Then don't you already have the answers? I'm glad you do. And I'm being serious when I say this because there's a lot of parents who don't know. And I'll make this video and there'll be more people that come and say, oh, now I see why your daughter went no contact. Okay.
So when people say, I see exactly why your child went no contact, like I was saying earlier, it's because usually the problematic behavior is being demonstrated in the video itself. And if an estranged parent doesn't have the self-awareness to realize what they said or did that was wrong in the video, then it's still not going to make sense to them, you know? Like, everybody, regardless of personality structure, has blind spots. And there are certain things about ourselves that maybe we don't see that other people can see. In the case of people with a personality that's quite low in self-awareness, those blind spots are going to be more glaring, and it's going to be a lot more obvious to everybody else what the problematic behavior in question is. But that person's still not going to get it. They're going to be like, well, I didn't say anything wrong. Like, what do you mean? Like, I don't see how you got that from what I said. And that inability to absorb feedback, I see very commonly among estranged parents.
I'm still going to go to work today, okay? It's Monday and I got to get going. So, yeah, I hope you have an amazing day and I'm glad you're living your best life.
I can tell this person's in a lot of pain and very confused, and I truly do hope that she gets the clarity that she desires. I want to respond real quickly to her original video, to the video that this comment is on, because I'm kind of curious what was the context of that.
My youngest daughter first went no contact. I had every emotion that you can imagine. I was completely shocked. I never saw it coming. And then I was really angry. I was so mad that she would do this to not only me, but to our family, that she would just leave with no explanation. But then I found myself wanting to like wheel and deal or like negotiate, like take all the blame. What can I do? It's all my fault. I became apologetic. I'm so sorry. I should have done better. I should have been a better mother. And so then I had all this guilt from like, what did I do?
So when someone leaves seemingly out of the blue, there are usually a few reasons for that. One possibility is they didn't feel safe communicating the reason to the other person. So if the other person has shown themselves to be a physically or emotionally unsafe person, that's going to really discourage direct communication of their motives. You know, so like if you say, hey, these are my reasons, and the other person starts yelling at you, starts lashing out, starts manipulating you in a way that makes you feel worse about yourself, why in the world would you tell that person why you're leaving? Second possibility is that they've actually tried communicating the reason many times before, and they've learned through that trial and error that it's pointless, that it's not effective, that that person is not receptive to feedback. And so the definition of insanity is to continue to do the same thing over and over and over again that doesn't work, right? So why would they do something that has been proven time and time again doesn't work? Of course, they're going to try something different. The third possibility is that, hey, maybe they did tell you. I'm not saying this is necessarily the case for this woman, but in a lot of situations, estranged children do tell their parents over and over and over again. And they tell them even when they are choosing to estrange themselves, and they tell them specifically what the reason is. And again, that person is not receptive to hearing it. In more rare cases, I think it is possible that maybe the adult child has poor communication skills or has trouble communicating directively, maybe is passive aggressive in their communication style, doesn't know how to confront things head on. But if that's the case, where were they supposed to learn that? From their parents, right? Communication skills are a direct reflection of how you were raised. So even then, it might be an opportunity for accountability. Again, I'm not sure which of these cases, if any, is the case for this particular mother, but I thought I would kind of clarify, because a lot of estranged parents say why do they just leave out of the blue? I have absolutely no reason. These are some of the possibilities of why this person left out of the blue without giving a reason.
This commenter has a good comment and says, all these estranged kids that have nothing to say or don't want to talk sure have a lot to say on social media. And I agree with that because, the comment section is just filled with estranged children lashing out and telling us what all we've done wrong and what their parents have done wrong. And my question is it's kind of confusing why, if they have so much to say on social media, why don't they just share it with the parents that are asking? Now, this doesn't have anything to do with my situation because that's not the case for this situation with me. But a lot of parents, it is. A lot of parents are cut off. They have no reason. They have no idea why. And they ask their estranged children and they won't tell them. So I do find it quite ironic that they are so active in the comment section that they refuse to talk to their parents who apparently have done them so dirty. So wanted to share that comment because it is so true.
So one of the top comments on this video is actually, I told my mom in person dozens of times. I left voicemails, I wrote letters, I sent emails. To this day, she claims she doesn't know. I've never been happier since going no contact. Someone else says, kids don't go no contact out of the blue with no explanation. They've either tried over and over and finally gave up, or the problem is so obvious that the parent asking what in this innocent little voice and pretending like they don't know is so upsetting that they can't even. Yeah, like all things I've been trying to communicate in this video myself. There seems to be a real disconnect here where estranged parents are saying adult children are not communicating the reason, and adult children are saying I've communicated the reason time and time again. And in some of those cases, there's even a paper trail. There are text sends, there are letter sends, there are voicemails, and the parent still refuses to absorb that information. Estranged parents, if you keep wondering why estranged children are saying this, it's not that they're lying. It's not that they haven't tried to communicate it with their parents. It's that a lot of parents who end up estranged have this inability to absorb feedback and to take responsibility. And that may not be the case for every single one of you, but it is the case for enough that enough estranged children are saying the same thing over and over and over again, right? There's a playbook here. There's a prototype here at play of the estranged parent who will not listen to feedback. That's what we're talking about here. Now, one thing that I actually do agree with her on, that some of you guys might actually disagree on, I do think that it's a little bit questionable when anybody decides to create a social media identity around airing out their dirty laundry and vilifying a person in particular by only telling their side of the story. Let me be clear. I don't mean if you're an estranged child and you've been abused by your parents and you want to raise awareness about the way that abuse can show up in parent-child relationships, that's totally fine. But if you build an entire brand around discussing the specific details of your situation, and it's very clear that you're speaking with a lot of contempt about your parent, and obviously we only get to hear your side of the story, that does sometimes make me wonder. Honestly, it does sometimes make me wonder what is the other side of this story? Because people who have healed from abuse, in most cases, they want to move forward constructively. They want to heal, they want to help other people heal. They're not trying to beat a dead horse for an infinite amount of time. And actually, there are a lot of these like narcissism content creators who in every single video are just pointing fingers so much and vilifying other people and directing a lot of vitriol at these unnamed or sometimes named people that I just kind of think, no, like, I get the sense you're probably the problem in your life, because there's a real willingness to vilify other people and not a lot of attention directed inwards. And this goes both ways, by the way. This goes for the parents and this goes for the children. If you build your entire brand around shit-talking the other person, in my mind, I'm always going to wonder a little bit. Are you maybe the problem here? Now, this last one that I'm going to react to is actually from someone who says she's a therapist. So I watched this video. I had some intellectual qualms with some of the things that she said in the video. So let's watch.
So I'm noticing something in the estrangement community, whether it's adult being estranged from child or child being estranged from adult, whatever it is, that I think needs to be addressed. And maybe somebody's already done it, I just haven't seen it. But what I'm noticing in the work that I do, I treat emotions for people. And it's kind of nice because I can be on either side of the spectrum. I can treat the kids or I can treat the adults. And I often do both. But what I'm noticing about this conversation about adult and child estrangement, adult-child estrangement with the parents and all of that, is that there are these two groups of adult children, and there's two groups of adult parents. The first group of adult kids are the kids that were abused, maybe were neglected, rejected, something like that, from parents, from abusive parents who really did have some significant either diagnoses or just, engaged in behavior that was unacceptable. And now that adult estranged child is having to heal from that. I get that. And sometimes no contact may be the way to go. Most of the time, those people are looking for a way to exist with their families on some level, because they are still facing holidays, they're facing all of these other things that, that they go through, that they are confronted with, and they would like to be able to exist in some sort of peaceful way. That is one whole unique set of circumstances that absolutely sometimes requires a person to go, no contact, all of that kind of stuff. There's this other set of people, however, who have parents who were not abusive, who were not neglectful, who were not rejecting, but who they don't understand or don't get along with on some level, or are disgruntled with for some reason. They have been good parents. They're not perfect, but they've been good parents. And the adult child is using the argument that the abused and neglected and rejected truly have to divorce their own families for reasons that are not illegitimate reasons, but reasons that are not as severe, not as significant as the abused and neglected group.
Right, I'm going to pause here for a second. So I understand this person was a therapist. I was curious what kind of therapist. I can't find much information about like her full name or what her credentials are, but basically her argument that she's making is there are two groups of people. One is the group of truly abused children and truly abusive parents, and the second group is kids who just don't get along with otherwise good parents, and that both groups are using the same argument, even the ones who have a less significant reason. I want to start off by saying that I actually do believe there are rare cases where adult children unfairly accuse or estrange from their parents. And I believe this for a couple of reasons. One is that, again, there are billions of people on this earth. And there's always an exception to the rule. And I don't feel comfortable saying with one sweeping brushstroke, oh, everybody in this giant group of people is exactly this way, because I know there is an exception to prove me wrong. Secondly, I've heard people admit this. Even in my doormat mom video, there was a comment of somebody who's saying, I experienced substance-induced psychosis, and this was me. I unfairly accused my parents, and they loved me, and we were able to rekindle and come back together. And I think that is beautiful. But clearly, it does happen. There are even some adult children who sometimes admit, hey, I unfairly accused my parent. It happens for certain reasons. Just like there are parents with certain mental health issues, there are also children with certain mental health issues. And not all of those issues are caused by trauma or parenting mistakes. Sometimes there are truly, biological genetic factors or substance-induced factors that would cause someone to behave in a way that is unfair to their parents. And lastly, I see how younger generations weaponize therapy speak. I see how manipulative people latch on to these terms in order to hurt other people. The issue with this last one, though, is that I do not believe people are born manipulative. I believe that manipulation and abusiveness and personality disorders are by and large caused by traumas that happen in crucial developmental periods. So if there is an estranged child weaponizing therapy speak, I typically do think that they learn that probably from their parents. Clarification though, I don't think it's ever about someone just not liking their parents. I don't think anyone estranges from their parents just because they don't like them. If they're estranging themselves from their parents and they haven't actually experienced something traumatic, there's usually a mental health issue going on. It's not just, I don't really like my mom, so I'm gonna cut her off completely. That's not how it usually goes. However, we gotta be very specific in defining these constructs. What are these less significant reasons to estrange? My definition, I think a significant reason to estrange from someone includes any sort of unwanted physical contact, which encompasses, physical or sexual abuse. Any sort of major betrayal that reveals just a total disregard for that person's rights or well-being, like a parent sleeping with their child's partner, or a parent refusing to protect their child from abuse, or a parent getting caught saying the most awful, disrespectful, contemptuous, cruel things about their child. Those would be examples of like a big betrayal. Smaller, more chronic emotional betrayals that cannot seem to be repaired through confrontation. So things like chronic invalidation, chronic nitpicking and criticism, chronic possessive, controlling, jealous behavior, chronic projection. All of these plus an inability for the child to get the parent to repair that. An inability for the parent to change their behavior. All of these are, in my opinion, significant reasons for somebody to cut off their parents. But the reason it's so important to specify is that there are those out there who will automatically assume, based on what this therapist is saying, that when she says significant, she means physical abuse. And when she says less significant, she means emotional abuse. And that is extremely dangerous. I think we need to be very mindful of the rhetoric we're using and how that can be weaponized by abusers. But let's continue watching.
The reason this is a problem is that what it does is it minimizes, in these conversations online that you see, people fighting back and forth, it minimizes the experience to the rest of the world of those who have been abused, neglected, and all of that, because you have those who haven't been making the same arguments and using the same tools and techniques that you're using to get well and to try to overcome and to try to heal yourself. You have this whole other group of estranged adult children using the things that you are needing to use to get whole and get well for reasons that are nowhere near what you had to deal with. And what's happening is it's making it look like you're the same group of people, and you're not. You have legitimate reasons and things that have happened in your life that cause significant trauma, and there's a whole group of other adult kids who are just mad or just disgruntled or just don't like their parents. And you're being lumped into the same group. And I don't think that that's right. And I don't think that that's fair, and I don't think that that represents those who do have a significant problem appropriately. And so for those who are the ones who have been through abuse, have been through trauma, have been, neglected, I think it's okay for you to call that other group out and say, hey, you have no idea what it is to be abused. I do, and you don't. Because some of these people are calling abuse things that are like, what are you talking about? That's not abuse, And it goes both ways. It goes the parents' direction too. I'm not attacking the kids here. I'm just saying those of you who truly have been through something that is a significant abuse like that, and for whom that platform is there for, to try to heal everyone in the family, it is being exploited and manipulated by a whole subgroup of young adults who don't have the same experiences as you do.
So, first off, I disagree that it minimizes the experience of real victims. Those with severe trauma typically feel pretty validated, even hearing the experiences of those with less severe trauma as well. And if someone chooses to weaponize therapy speak and accuse someone unfairly when that person hasn't done anything, that's a reflection of that person. That has no reflection on so-called real victims. Real victims don't need anyone outside of them in order to legitimize what they've been through. And therefore, outsiders who are weaponizing therapy speak also do not have the power to delegitimize their experiences. Again, I really worry that abusive parents are going to use this argument to try to invalidate and silence their victims. And I'm also just kind of curious where this therapist is getting this idea that there are people out there who simply just cut off their parents willy-nilly, and particularly the idea that there's a good chunk of them, that they're a big group of people. Because I would wonder, is that something that their parents are saying in therapy? Because if so, some estranged parents who are abusive and manipulative and skilled at distorting the situation to other people, of course, are going to portray the situation as if their children's complaints are neglectable. As for this idea that it's okay for truly abused children to come out and tell other people your trauma doesn't compare to mine, absolutely not. I completely disagree with that. It is not okay to treat trauma like a contest. Like I've been saying, trauma is relative. We also shouldn't assume that we know the details of somebody else's life when we don't, as outsiders. And I kind of find myself wondering, how does a therapist not understand how dangerous this kind of discourse can be? Yeah, that's my take. Let me know what you think in the comments. All right, folks, that's all that we have for today. It was kind of a long one, so I hope you enjoyed the extra content today. As always, I would love to hear your own experiences in the comments down below. Don't forget to check out Aura, and I'll see you soon.